My name is Devyani, and this is Between Sessions, a weekly breakdown of the news, rumors, and racing stories shaping Formula One. This week, George Russell says that he does not need to play mind games with Kimi Antonelli. Oscar Piastri reminds everyone that respect does not always equal friendship. And Franco Colapinto draws in over 500,000 people to his show run in Argentina. So let's head to the newsstand. Now, it's been a long break, but the two main pieces of news that I've been thinking about is Jean-Pierre Lambiase announcing that he will be leaving for McLaren no later than 2028, and this comes after getting the blessing from Max Verstappen, and Max saying that he would have been stupid not to take this offer just based on what they were giving him and the security for his family and all the other things you need to consider when taking a new job. Second piece of news is that the Turkish Grand Prix will be returning starting 2027. Now, this does not take away a spot from another race on the calendar, but because Zandvoort is leaving after this year and Spa and Barcelona are going to be rotational, it left a spot empty, and that will be replaced with Istanbul Park. And you know what? It could be worse is my motto with this stuff, because Istanbul Park is a pretty nice track. I'm a fan. When we were there last in 2020, when Formula One was there back in 2020, Lance Stroll was on pole, Lewis Hamilton won a 7th World Championship. That turn 8, I think it's a left-hander, is really nice and smooth to watch the car, so I'm happy about it. It's Miami GP week, and it's been a while, so here's everything you missed in the 2026 season thus far. All the teams and drivers showed up to Bahrain for official pre-season testing, with Max Verstappen saying that the new cars are anti-racing, and Fernando Alonso saying that the role of the driver is dying, and many other drivers adding their critiques to this. Come Australia, the first race of the season, Aston Martin was limiting their laps due to their flying death trap, potentially causing nerve damage to their drivers. Kimi Antonelli had a big shunt in FP3. Max Verstappen crashed out of qualifying starting P20, but that crash allowed Kimi's mechanics more time to fix his car, so he was able to participate in qualifying. Lando Norris's car was being held together by duct tape. George Russell took pole with Kimi Antonelli right behind him. On race day, Oscar Piastri crashed on his lap to the grid. Franco Colapinto was avoiding a slow-starting Liam Lawson. Ferrari's smaller turbo assisted Charles Leclerc in getting the lead at the start and battling with George Russell for many, many laps. Isaac Hadjar had a car failure. In the end, George Russell won this race with Kimi Antonelli and Charles Leclerc right behind him. Also, rookie Arvid Lindblad had points on debut. Now, in China, George Russell won the sprint race with the Ferrari drivers behind him. Kimi Antonelli is kind of all over the place because he dropped like 5 places at the start of the race from 2nd to 7th. Then he had an incident with Isaac Hadjar for which he had a 10-second penalty, which he served during a pit stop. So all over the place for Kimi Antonelli. It's tea time, and George Russell gave a very interesting interview on CNN, and one of the quotes was him being asked about David Coulthard, saying that George needs to use his experience and kind of get into Kimi's head a little bit, and George says this: "That's not how I go about my business. If I look at somebody like Lewis Hamilton, I think he's somebody who has won, obviously, a huge amount in his life, and he's always won in a fair and dignified way. So, but then, on the flip side, you've got other great champions who've won through gamesmanship and whatnot. So I know what I stand for, I know the sort of person I am, and I know that I'm capable in the race car, and I don't need to win through any of those means." First of all, does George Russell think that Lewis Hamilton has never played mind games? And I don't mean mind games in the Michael Schumacher way of it, where he's like stopping Nico Rosberg from peeing before qualifying and then Nico has to pee in a bucket. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about the way one goes to speaking to the media and how things are perceived. And Lewis is very good, like very media savvy in a good way, just because he has had to deal with more media scrutiny than a lot of these other drivers because he's black and people are like inherently racist sometimes. Not sometimes, a lot of the times. And he has had to deal with that and navigate that over the last, 20 years. And because of that, he is very good at dealing with the media and molding perceptions in a way that it doesn't even seem like he's doing anything malicious, because he's not. And I also don't think that like gamesmanship and mind games are inherently like a moral failing. Anyway, good luck to George Russell. I think he's right. He doesn't need to play mind games against Kimi Antonelli. It's not. He can just wait for things to play out a little bit, maybe hope for Kimi's inexperience to help, and also just be on his top game. If he is at his best, then he can rely on that. You know what I mean? Like, he's right. He doesn't need to play psychological games against Kimi Antonelli. He's also quite adamant that he might have another chance to fight for a world championship. He's asked, he said, the interviewer says, "I remember speaking to Nico Rosberg and Lando saying that the feeling is that this is the opportunity, that the need to take this opportunity doesn't come along very often or every year for yourself or anybody else. You have to maximize your shot. Is there any sense of that? And George says, no, not at all, because I believe these opportunities will come more than once. And I think it's very rare for somebody in any industry, if you're working so hard to achieve a certain goal, that you only ever get one shot. I've been in Formula One. This is my 8th season. This is my first time, but I'm still only 28 years old. I'm hoping this is going to be the one and only shot. Nevertheless, I'm going to go for it this year. And I think that's a very healthy way of looking at it, because it does relieve the pressure. If you think that you'll have another shot in the future and that this isn't your only shot ever, it does help you be like, okay, there is more for me after this. I think he's a really good mindset going into this championship. He's saying there's no momentum on Kimi Fed because obviously it stopped with this break. He's got his head screwed on very straight. Fernando Alonso says he doesn't know if this is going to be his last season in Formula One and that he's making all these considerations. And I just think, while Fernando Alonso and I have parasocial beef, when he leaves the grid, it is going to be a big deal. But when he leaves it properly forever, not like the 2-year, 3-year hiatus he did, it is going to be a loss, because sometimes he pops out with the funniest quotes. He puts on a great show for you on track when it's really boring out there, because he's always going for it. Lando Norris says that he is not the boss and was stopped in an interview from answering questions about the Formula One regulations and Max Verstappen. Now, this interview was being done by a journalist at The Guardian, and they were talking about Lando winning the Laureus Sports Breakthrough Award, and he wasn't there in person, but this was like an interview at a separate time. And there comes a point where the journalist knows that certain topics are not to be talked about really, but he asks about them anyway, and then his manager, who is on the phone, speaks up, and it's the only time he's spoken up through the interview to say we're not talking about that, let's move on. And then after a little bit, one of the aides who's there in person is okay, time's up, we need to go. And Lando's kind of sitting there awkwardly oh, haha, I don't mind answering it, and he says some kind of a politically correct answer, right? And my thing here is there's a lot of discussion about drivers being muzzled and what they can and can't say. On one hand, at the end of the day, the drivers are employees of these companies, and at a certain point, they don't want the drivers talking negatively about Formula One and the new regulations. At the same time, I do think that managers and PR people are sometimes used as a buffer. They are made out to be the bad guy, so the driver doesn't have to say those unfortunate things. And it can be a combination of both things. It can be a combination of McLaren and Formula One saying that, hey, we actually don't want Lando Norris, the winner of said award, to be talking about Max Verstappen and how much he doesn't like these new F1 cars while he's supposed to be talking about this award. That does make sense. At the same time, I'm sure there are things that McLaren is don't fucking talk about this. Please just don't talk about this. We don't want you to put any more attention on it. We don't want to talk about how bad things are in Formula One outside Formula One. And whether or not, I think Lando could be no, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to say this. But he's a team player, right, in that sense. And he's okay, the team don't want me to do this. I'm not going to do this. Sure, there might be other personalities on the grid that are I'm going to say what I want to say, and you're not going to stop me. But that's just not his vibe. You know what I mean? I don't think it's completely McLaren are evil. Again, they're a corporation. It's not a family. The people inside it are a family, but the overall corporation is looking out for itself and its number one priority and goal, which is profit. Oh, another thing is that the Formula One teams are being investigated by the Italian Ministry of Economic Police for tax fraud. Essentially, they're alleging that Formula One drivers, or the teams, haven't paid Italy taxes on income they've made while racing in Italy. And they go back all the way to Mugello, which is 2020. And obviously these last couple of years, they've been racing in Imola and Monza. So they're basically saying there's a bunch of income tax that Formula One hasn't paid. The more I read about it seems like it's not necessarily investigating the drivers, but the teams, in fact. However, all the memes about the drivers going to jail have been extremely funny. And the concept of Italy doing this, looking back into this, and it's not just Formula One, they're doing it for a lot, sports in general, but the concept of them doing this just as Kimi Antonelli, an Italian, has taken lead of the championship is hilarious, and the concept that they are trying to fix the Formula One championship by putting everyone else in jail, hilarious to think about. I've also been doing a lot of scrolling while on break, and one of the posts I cannot stop thinking about is it's Formula One, the official Formula One account, and the caption is anything can happen and usually does, and it's a picture of Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And I did eventually realize that this was from the promotional video that the drivers filmed for F1, where they're all saying little lines, and it's kind of like a hype video for F1. But I remember thinking, what is going on here? And then Red Bull Racing replied to that post saying, Verstappen posting on main. And that's when you know, like, you've broken the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh walls, because, like, what are we doing right now? Although, with how engagement on the internet works, it makes sense that they're operating this way, but I'm kind of just like, Red Bull. Formula One stakeholders also met and decided on some changes that they're going to be implementing in the regulations for Miami. And there's a lot of jargon in there. The two main things I was focused on was the qualifying like lap recharge limit, which hopefully should mean that drivers are able to go more flat out during qualifying and not worry so much about recharging. The other thing is also the super clipping allowance that they've done in the race, which again, these are all supposed to be safety measures and helping with battery management. I don't think it's going to make huge significant differences, but the point is to make it so that the drivers have to worry less about battery management, and especially in qualifying. Like, we want them to go flat out. That's what the fun of qualifying is. So I really can't say anything until I see the cars on track and see if it's even noticeable, like that there's a difference being made here, because it's very possible that it's not. I mean, the drivers feeling one thing and us visibly seeing a change is another thing, so we'll see how that plays out. In other news, Charles Leclerc is now a L'Oreal Global Ambassador. Over the break, there's also been a lot of good content coming out. There was Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman on the Cool Down Room. There was Alex Albon on the Fast and Curious. Really hilarious interview. Not really speaking much about Formula One, but truly peak. Oscar Piastri on the High Performance podcast. That's where that clip about him saying, you know, having respect for one another is not the same thing as being friends with one another, and the internet took that really to heart. Franco Colapinto did a show run in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and like 600,000 people showed up, and a lot of people are like, oh wait, should there be an Argentine GP? Like, should we bring that back? And you know what? Go for it. At this point, like, put one in space. A couple other things to watch. There was the Race podcast with Stefano Domenicali, where he basically just, there's no war in Ba Sing Se Us for an hour, talking about how there's no problems in Formula One. Everyone's really positive about the changes in Formula One. We're like, okay, Judy, like, relax. Is the Dai Li taking you to Lake Laogai and brainwashing you too? I also went to my first IndyCar race in Long Beach. I flew to LAX and I stayed with my friend Megan. And I am a very casual IndyCar watcher. Like, from time to time, I will throw on the race on the TV, or I'll follow what's going on, like, on Twitter. But I'm not dialed into all the stuff behind the scenes. And I thought it was really cool. Like, the race itself was kind of boring, and that didn't bode too well for the whole IndyCar is better than Formula One thing, which I just don't think you need to compare them. Like, I didn't see much of a comparison, except for that they're single-seater cars. I thought it was really cool, especially from a fan aspect, like how much access you get, how close you can be to the cars. Like, the IndyCar paddock is like $80, and you can see all the cars sitting there, and it's just cool to like hang around and see the mechanics doing stuff to the cars, or seeing the cars being rolled out, and you're like in the middle of the paddock and they're like, excuse me, honk honk, and it's an IndyCar coming through. I just really like that aspect of it. It was very hot in Long Beach. I did get my first sunburn in life ever, which is crazy, but I had a great time. There's also like an autograph session, which we stood in line for, and the drivers are very generous with their time, with their selfies, with their, like, we were talking to Will Power, and he was like, so Megan was like, this is Deviani's first IndyCar race, and he was like, have you been to Formula One before? And I was like, yeah, I watch Formula One. And he was like, well, I think you're gonna like this better, and like so confidently, and I love that energy. Okay, that's all I got. I am heading to Miami this week. I'm very excited.